Good morning, everyone. This is Father Nate, missionary priest in Italy, and thanks for joining us today, July 25th, on No Greater Delight, our podcast on Marian feasts and Marian meditations. Well, to start us off, we have the words of the Abbot Orsini, who tells us they celebrate Notre Dame du Boucher, 2.5 leagues from Blanc, Berry in France. I guess they also celebrate it in Quebec, right? In France, a pilgrimage which attracts a great concourse of pilgrims. The image of the Blessed Virgin is made of wood of an aged oak, where the image was first found. Okay. Likewise, they celebrate Madonna dell'Acqua Santa in Genova, in Italy. This has been quite an interesting event, right? The shrine was finally completed in 1730, held to be the site of a Marian apparition. That's why they built the shrine there. In this church, in 1832, they celebrated the marriage between Venerable Maria Cristina di Savoia and Ferdinand II Borbone, who was the King of Naples. And now, I have to admit, this is the last apparition or celebration today, but it's a very particular one. It's called the Mother of God with 3 hands, which is in the monastery of Hilandar in Mount Athos, Macedonia, in Greece. Okay. Art specialists say this image comes from a Greek painter of the 14th century. The monks of Mount Athos and many others say that it's an icon done by Saint Luke, right? That was found, which was found in Damascus in the times of Saint John Damascene, which would be the 8th century, right? So the weird thing is, if you look at the image, yeah, sure enough, there are 3 hands in the image. Like, you have the 2 hands of Our Lady, and then there's like a 3rd hand just hanging out in the bottom, right? That's pretty weird. But why? But it's interesting. Well, we're told that, according to this tradition, right, that Saint John Damascene brought the icon with him near Jerusalem, where he spent his life. After his death, which took place in 749, the icon remained in the monastery of Saint Saba, I think it is, until the 13th century, when it was given to the Metropolitan of Serbia, who was in pilgrimage in the Holy Land. Then he brought it back, and there's a whole story that eventually ends up in this monastery. The thing that we're really interested in is why it's called the Mother of God with 3 hands, right? In their abbey, by the way, technically there is no abbot, right? They have a vicar, but the icon takes the place of the abbot, right? So they obviously really love it. So okay, so why is it that this icon has 3 hands, right? It goes back to St. John Damascene, right? And we find the story in the life of St. John Damascene, which was written, it seems like, by a certain John in the 10th century, right? So certainly, there's always people who doubt these things, but it's a fact that St. John Damascene was very much against the iconoclasm, right? The destruction of images, which took place with the emperor, it looks like Leo Isaurico, that's in the Italian here. He was destroying images between 726 and 730, right? And St. John Damascene was writing letters, a series of letters, in defense of the use of images. So the emperor was pretty angry about that, and he wanted to punish Damascene. But because Damascene was in Arab territory, right, because again, we're already in the 700s, he said, what can I do? Like, he's not in my jurisdiction. I'm just very angry. So, what happened? So he played a trick. In 730, the Caliph received a letter that was in the beautiful calligraphy of St. John Damascene, right? Directed to the emperor in charge, where he offered to betray the city of Damascus, right? Anyways, it was clearly not a real letter, right? Because John Damascene did not write a letter to the king, to the emperor, offering to betray the city of Damascus. They weren't even friends. So the Caliph, he loved John Damascene's family, but he was really angry. And he said that the hand that wrote that letter should be cut off at the wrist. Oh boy. So, what happens? Yeah, in fact, he said, okay. And so they cut off John Damascene's hand at the wrist, and they ordered it to be hung in the public, in the open plaza, to dissuade people from doing things like that. So what happens? Well, that evening, St. John Damascene goes into the church where he prayed before the image of Our Lady. he was crying and praying for the restitution, like the restoration of his cut off hand, right? So there's a beautiful prayer that's written, obviously, in his life. After saying this beautiful prayer, John fell asleep, and the Mother of God appeared to him in a dream, saying, "Your hand is healed. Without delay, fulfill the vow that you have promised in your prayer." Let me see here. Oh, beautiful. Yes, he says, this is part of the prayer he made. He's like, if you can, God can heal my hand by the means of your prayers. And I will compose for you and for him, who was incarnate in you, hymns and harmonious melodies. Yep. And I will become an instrument of the Orthodox faith. Right? And so that's exactly what he did. Right? Recognizing the divine intervention, the leader of Damascus brought John Damascene back to his post and restored all of his dignities. And St. John Damascene he requested that a silver votive hand be placed in the icon next to the hand of the Mother of God, right? Which is very beautiful. So that's why the icon has 3 hands. One is St. John Damascene's. And that's what we're celebrating in the Marian world today, on July 25th. For today's Marian meditation, taken from the book by Father Ildefonso Villar, we read the third and concluding point of Meditation 90. The meditation is entitled The Heart of Our Lady, and this point is entitled Your Own Crown. This is the crown for your heart, a crown of thorns through sacrifice, through the mortifications of your passions, to help you keep away from sin. In this manner you will acquire negative purity, the first rose which can be expected to blossom forth from those thorns. And God, seeing you so well disposed and receptive of his grace, will generously pour himself out into your heart. Countless virtues will flourish in your heart, thereby rendering it similar to that of Jesus in the thorns of loving sacrifice, and similar to the heart of Mary in the roses of her virtues, now duplicated in your own soul. Negative purity is essential. Through it, in imitation of Our Lady, you will cast sin away from your heart. And then positive purity will fill your soul with the grace of the divine life. Active purity will faithfully correspond to your graces. Ask your beloved Mother most insistently to assist you, to make you similar to her in all virtues, but chiefly in her immaculate purity. Suggest to her that you want a crown of virtues similar to hers, and tell her that you want above all that lily which blossoms in the center of her Immaculate Heart. For today's reading from the Admirable Heart of Mary by St. John Eudes, we continue with the Saint's commentary on the Magnificat, and today we start with chapter 11, entitled, He hath put down the mighty from their seat, and hath exalted the humble. The time being ripe, when the Father of Mercy was pleased to fulfill his intention from all eternity to save mankind, his divine wisdom, whose resolutions are impenetrable, willed to employ means to that end, which apparently had no capacity for or conformity with the greatness of this mighty work. What are these means? Here they are. God sent his only begotten Son into the world in a perishable and mortal state, in such abjection and lowliness that he himself says, I am a worm and no man. That's Psalm 21, verse 7. Bearing as a title of honor in Scripture, Novissimus Virorum, the most abject of men. That's Isaiah 53, verse 3. And this adorable Father wills his only begotten Son, generated in his bosom from all eternity and equal to him in all things, to be born of a mother who is in truth most holy, but so lowly and humble in her own eyes and in the eyes of the world, that she esteems herself the least of all creatures. Furthermore, this divine Father, wishing to provide helpers and co-workers to work with his divine Son in the supreme work of redemption of the world, chose 12 poor fishermen without learning, consequence, or any other qualities that might have distinguished them among men. He sent these 12 fishermen throughout the land to destroy a religion based on conformity with human inclinations, a religion rooted for several thousand years in the hearts of men, and to establish instead a completely new religion, which is opposed to the first and contrary to all the inclinations of human nature. These 12 poor fishermen went everywhere to preach and establish this new faith while destroying the first religion. But how were they received? Everyone rose up against them, the great and the lowly, the rich and the poor, men and women, the learned and the ignorant,
philosophers and priests of false gods, kings and princes. All men in general expended every effort to oppose the preaching of the gospel, which 12 fishermen strove to proclaim. They were seized and cast into prisons with chains on their hands and feet. They were treated like rogues and magicians. They were beaten, burned, stoned, crucified. In short, they were made to suffer all the most atrocious torments. But what happened? They emerged victorious. They triumphed gloriously over the great, the powerful, the wise, and all the monarchs of the world. They annihilated the religion, or rather the irreligion and abominable idolatry, which hell had established throughout the world, and they established the Christian faith and religion in its stead. Finally, they became masters of the world, and God bestowed on them the principality of the earth. Thou shalt make them princes over all the earth. That's from Psalm 44, verse 17.
Hello, and we hope that you enjoyed listening to our Marian podcast. In the spirit of Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, we say to you that there is no greater delight than to spread the devotion of Our Lady. We hope you share these sentiments and encourage you greatly to share with a loved one. Know that you are always in our prayers, and we ask that you keep us in yours. God bless.